These two guys have Minnesota sports flowing in their veins. Mackey and Judd on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
A vision of us both, twin towers out there. I think it's going to be very different. The NBA hasn't seen something like this, and it's going to be scary. It'll be scary.
Ultimately, while this move is intriguing, we will need to see if there is cohesion offensively before we can label Rudy Gobert a definitive difference maker in a loaded Western Conference.
Like the shrug emoji there, to be determined. Can the target centers gel together? It sounds like they're going to wait till the last preseason game to put those guys on the court at the same time, just because of. So Katz had the hospital stay, and then Gobert had a knee brace on under his leg sleeve in the game that he played in against the Lakers.
I'll have some thoughts on that when you get to it.
Well, it is a little, he's 30. He's got some wear and tear. Not in love with the knee brace. Is it like a contusion? Do we know?
Let's get to the primary topic first, and then I will address a long-standing belief of mine, but I'm not going to do it up top.
Okay. Well, this is Mackey and Judd, daily Minnesota sports, entertainment, therapy, speculation. It's a Write That Down Wednesday, so we will get to our weekly predictions and accountability session. But old Macadac woke up this morning, took a big sip of his Timberwolves Kool-Aid out of his Timberwolves thermos, and splashed some Timberwolves Kool-Aid on his face to wake up for the day. Yes, 1 week away from the season.
Like Brute, you smell like a Timberwolf.
Yes, it smells it smells like Sam Cassell at the end of a 2.5-hour playoff game after his big balls dance. That's what my Timberwolves cologne smells like.
Sorry, I asked.
There's another Timberwolves garage sale happening.
Oh, really?
They sent out a memo that they're doing the locker room clean out. I didn't see when it was, but
I got to get down there for some stuff.
One of the great Mackey and Judd radio bits of all time was the Timberwolves garage sale.
Yes. Oh, because it was so fitting. The most disgusting thing, and I think it was Harrigan, was David Kahn's mole.
Oh, in a jar.
In a jar. You remember that? Oh, yeah. Obviously you do.
Maybe Dex. Maybe that's still in the system somewhere.
I think it is. I'll find it.
Okay. So scrolling through Twitter this morning and saw a John Hollinger think piece on the Timberwolves. John Hollinger, notably the inventor of the player efficiency rating, I believe, when he was with ESPN.com. Then he went and worked for the Memphis Grizzlies front office. Usually pretty spot on with his analytical analysis.
Sure.
But he's very skeptical about the Timberwolves after this Gobert trade. Not in that they're going to be a train wreck or anything, but he poses a bunch of questions and some mild panic for the long-term future of the franchise. I'm gonna go through some of this stuff. I feel like he is off base, but we can talk about it. So, first of all, he thinks betting the under on 48.5 is where you should be with the Timberwolves. He's got them so they won 46 last year. He's got them one win better at 47. So John Hollinger telling you, take the under. He's worried about Anthony Edwards taking a big step forward because of his inconsistent jump shot and disappearing motor at times, where he just stops driving to the hoop for games at a time. And then the biggest thing he's worried about is more long-term, that this all-in trade for Gobert, essentially, it made it more fun for the next couple of years, but it cut off a lot of their assets for fortifying the Anthony Edwards prime, which isn't going to happen in for 4 more years. So here's what he wrote. It occurs to me that we've glossed right over what is perhaps the most interesting part of this debate. By surrendering first-round picks and pick swaps through 2029, and by doing so to acquire a player who was already 30, the Timberwolves essentially accelerated their timeline by several years. Mm-hmm. What the Wolves did was exactly what you might expect a team to do if its priority is to get the most out of Karl Anthony Towns' prime years. But it was also the exact opposite of what a team might do if the goal is to get the most out of Anthony Edwards' prime years, which presumably would be from roughly 2026 through 2031. By the end of that era, Towns will be 35, Gobert will be 38, and the Wolves will have, that's at the end of, that's 10 years from now. The Wolves will have had little to no draft help for nearly a decade, which also falsely assumes that there's no other way to acquire first-round picks in the next 10 years.
Right.
How good can the Wolves be when they have no more picks to trade and still have several question marks dotting the roster? And more philosophically, how good do they need to be to justify everything they traded to get Gobert?
Okay.
So John Hollinger, one of the smarter analytical minds in the NBA, is pouring cold water all over this thing.
All right, from the outside, like just an outsider, 10,000 foot view, right? He makes a lot of good points. But what he's missing entirely is where this franchise is at from not only a basketball but a business perspective too. And
he mentions a little of that, by the way.
Okay, but that is an incredibly important thing because you are in right now in a transition from Glenn Taylor to guys that are going to be aggressive and guys that want to win. And keep in mind, and you can say this is stupid, but it's just a fact. Guys that want, and rightfully so, a new arena. All right, so you are trying to win right now. There's no doubt about that. The other question becomes what is considered success here. So I get it. If you're the Lakers, the Celtics, you're like, well, yeah, success is a championship trophy. This franchise has been down for so long and has been lucky if they even qualify for the playoffs, much less make a playoff run. And so I get his points. And in a perfect world, guess what? You hold your draft picks. You're patient. You say, let's have Ant develop. You say all of those things. But the reality is, I think starting probably, Phil, with Mark Lowry, is that you are in a position of needing to do something. Like a splash is necessary. And that's what they're doing. And I don't disagree. And the last thing on the draft picks is this. If this was the Vikings and they had traded that many first-round picks, I think it becomes a problem. Because, in my opinion, in that league, the draft is a huge part of the lifeblood of your franchise. Basketball, I'm not saying it's not important. It definitely is important. But if you achieve the success that the Wolves are banking on, and yes, they are banking on, like they are taking a gamble, but that is what sports is, calculated gambles. If you are right about the gamble that you're taking, to your point, a lot of those draft picks that they're going to lose out on, i.e. non-lottery picks, are replaceable parts. Like you can find those. So, I don't think the NBA draft and the football draft are comparable as far as the importance of the lifeblood to your franchise, unless you're just planning on being awful and getting like top 5 picks.
Yeah.
So I think this misses the overall big picture view of the Minnesota Timberwolves and does a really good job of addressing the view of what would be a lot of NBA teams, but the Wolves are not a lot of NBA teams.
I think the point on the one of the points on the draft picks, which I do agree with, is if in 2 or 3 years you're going to have Supermax Gobert, Supermax Cat, and max contract Anthony Edwards kicking in, and then you're going to hopefully pay Jaden McDaniels, probably not a max contract, but you're going to have these huge contracts, at least 2 Supermaxes, a max, and then something else with a couple of your other young players, maybe a Jalen Noel. I don't even know how you're going to fit all this in. Correct. So to fill out the rest of your 10 roster spots, you need cheap talent. It's sort of like the NFL in that regard, that if you're going to pay a quarterback $40 and an edge rusher $30 and a receiver here, okay, well, now I need a rookie scale contract, cornerback, rookie scale contract, interior defensive lineman, and right tackle or something, because I can't pay everybody. So does it make it harder for them to load their roster over the next, let's say, 5 to 8 years with players that are drafted in the late 20s? Yes, but are those players even guaranteed to be rotation players? No, because the draft it's hard to find rotation players in the NBA once you get past the 10th pick. Mm-hmm. It's very much a crapshoot. And the Wolves have actually done a pretty good job of this. They've got between Jalen Noel, Jaden McDaniels, I think there's a couple of guys from this last year's draft that could wind up being rotation players maybe later this year or next year. But I keep going back to this with all these, whether it's Ryan Russillo or Bill Simmons or John Hollinger, they're all just like, oh my God, how could you? What a risk. This is such a risk, right? What is the real risk?
Yeah.
What is the risk? So they have guaranteed themselves to be a playoff team, barring multiple bad injuries, and we can talk about the Gobert knee brace here in a little bit. But if these guys are even halfway healthy, they've guaranteed themselves to be in the playoffs during Anthony Edwards' developmental years, where he's looking to take jumps. So if I get Anthony Edwards being able to sharpen his playoff blade over the next few years, while they also maybe have a shot to do some damage if this thing peaks in the Western Conference, while Chris Paul ages out and LeBron ages out and the Warriors age out, there's a prize to be had in the Western Conference probably starting next year, and the Wolves are going to be in line to compete for it because of what they've done with this trade. Okay, so maybe they don't. Maybe they hit a glass ceiling in the next 3 to 4 years because Gobert is too old and Anthony Edwards isn't as good as he's going to be when he's 25 years old. Well, once his contract comes off the books, Anthony Edwards turns 25 and will have played in the playoffs presumably for like 4 or 5 straight seasons. And by then, there's going to be other creative things you can do to potentially move assets, or like over the next 2 or 3 years, if it's not working that well, Cat and Gobert both, even if their stock comes down, they both have first-round pick value in a trade. For sure. Like if you traded Cat next year or something because it's not working, you would get multiple first-round picks back and solve the problem that everyone's freaking out about to begin with. So it's like what is the, oh my God, what if they're the 6th seed and they get beat in the first round? That's still like the 3rd best season in Timberwolves history. So,
and when has guys like John Hollinger, Bill Simmons, Ryan Russillo ever given a crap about what the Minnesota Timberwolves have done as a franchise? Like not to say that they had to be like homers and big fans of the Wolves, but like, I guess why come out and crap on an organization who's been in the playoffs twice in 18 years and crucify them for trying to make themselves better? I just think in general, it's just kind of a weird stance by them to take for a team that really hasn't sniffed that much of success over 20 years.
But it's good that they are, though, because they now have takes on a team that they didn't give a damn about for close to 20 years. So like, I actually like that. The problem is in Bill's case, he views things through the prism of the Celtics. Well, this ain't the Celtics. Hollinger, his takes come from, and again, this is absolutely fine, but his takes come from just the overall league. And guess what? There's a lot of teams that would have done what the Wolves did. That's the thing, is this is a unique case. I don't think people understand, unless you're here, the potential in the last couple of years, and especially now, for relevance in a competitive market of a team that no one gave a damn about for 15 plus years, right? So like, I think I like the fact that people now have opinions and takes on the team, because it means that the franchise actually is relevant enough to do so. But all of that being said, I understand that the Wolves see an opportunity to pounce here. And to Phil's point, okay, let's say they're wrong. Boy, that's going to be a lot worse than the last 20 years, won't it? I mean, my God, those years were spent, how many years did the Wolves not get, the first or second or third pick, and then they drafted, or they did get the second pick, and they drafted a slappy that didn't work out. So I think unless you're here and following this franchise, it's very hard to put the template that you would across a normal franchise on the Wolves and say, you're screwing up.
Also, like on the draft picks, yes, they gave up a ton of draft picks in pick swaps, but they have a first-round pick in 2024. They will have a first-round pick in 2026 that may be a pick swap, depending on where the Jazz are at. You can't trade. You have to have a pick every other year, so you can't. I think part of the argument for Hollinger is you've lost flexibility to trade like a 2024 first for a point guard to replace D'Lo if he signs somewhere else or whatever. But there's just like, I would give Tim Connolly a little more credit that he'll find creative ways to mold this thing as needed. But right now, they're on track to be really competitive in the Western Conference, and they're on track for Anthony Edwards to maybe take a step forward and get some meaningful playoff experience. And then I kind of like what they've said. They've said, let's start there. Let's be relevant, which is a hard thing to achieve with this franchise. Let's be relevant for the fans, for the future of a new arena. Let's be relevant for the team and everything. Let's just build some equity here now. Let's be good right now and next year. And then if things start to look a little bit like we've peaked, hit a glass ceiling, we'll worry about that later. And we've hired people, Tim Connolly and then the front office he's building, to be creative and make something happen. That's why you bring Tim Connolly over, to figure out how to make the roster better. And step one was just get Rudy Gobert in here to fix the rim protection and the defensive rebounding and everything else. And I trust that he will figure it out again in 2 or 3 years if he needs to. There are worse things in the world than having a superstar player turning 25 years old in 2026 and having to figure out a second piece around him, right? I mean, the Mavericks have been trying to do this with Luka, and they're kind of they've kind of failed to put a second piece around Luka. They're still one of the best teams in the Western Conference. So people freak out about this if Anthony Edwards takes the steps we think he's going to take. And let's say the worst case scenario happens, which is they hit a glass ceiling, but they still make the playoffs the next few years. Gobert ages out, and I don't know, maybe Cat is not as good as, maybe he hits a glass ceiling or something. Although I think he's just going to be on the team for a while as a good player. But maybe you have to go find a second player to put next to Anthony Edwards at some point. Well, that's the position that like the Timberwolves were in with Kevin Garnett for 8 years. You know, that's the position that the Mavericks are in right now. It's you're still winning 50 games with that player as you look to find a second superstar. So I don't know.
The relevance of this franchise is huge for the franchise. It's absolutely huge. Because, I mean, they have been a laughingstock for far too long. And look, you know what? The primary pundits around this league haven't judged them to be important enough to do anything but completely mock. And so the fact that they are now in a place, and this is not true of a lot of teams, like with the Vikings, we won a Super Bowl. Why? Because they are capable. But the Wolves have been so bad, or were so bad for so long, and got it wrong for so long, that in this case, and yes, it's a low bar, but for them to be relevant and potentially good and maybe damn good is a huge step.
Yeah. Another thing from this article that's interesting, he says, this is Hollinger, the victory lap over keeping Jaden McDaniels out of the Gobert trade was perhaps overdone. McDaniels still needs to find a role on offense and quit fouling so much on defense to be a long-term solution at the three. Well, he's 21 years old. He did take huge steps forward last year. He was very good in the playoffs.
Not like Connolly?
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
That sounds like that's a weird one.
But think about what he's saying here. He is saying, I don't know if he's directly saying this, but he's essentially saying, you might have considered keeping the extra 2 future first-round picks for flexibility and to get those players in the house when Edwards is emerging into his prime, as opposed to Jay McDaniels now. And I think what the Wolves are saying is, we actually think Jay McDaniels could be the number 2 to Anthony Edwards' number 1 in like 5 years from now. So we'd rather play that scenario out so that if Gobert ages out and Cat ages out or goes somewhere else, we've got this ready-made second or third superstar player in Jaden McDaniels also turning 25. So I think the Timberwolves view the bet and the risks differently than a lot of other NBA talking heads, and I guess we'll see it play. The one thing I do agree with in this article, he points out a couple different times how year 2 is likely to be better than year 1 with the Rudy Gobert thing because it's going to take a while to figure out how to gel. You're going to have, by year 2, McDaniels and Anthony Edwards and the draft picks from this year and Jalen Noel, they're all going to be a year older. So it's a little bit like we talk about with the Vikings, that however good they are this year, they're probably going to be better next year. Right. Because everyone will just be 1 year used to the system. So that is like one of the things I agree with in this article. So
that's an interesting criticism, though, of Jaden. I think that's. I wonder if Connolly and Hollinger crossed paths at some point in time in their NBA executive days and didn't exactly get along or something.
I don't know. I mean, because he's basically saying a 21-year-old kid is not a finished product yet, and I think everyone involved would be like, "Yeah, we know." And
the draft pick, and the draft pick thing, right or wrong, I totally get. Like that is a point, and there were a lot of folks who said that's a lot of draft picks. But then if you're going to go to the player and be like, "Yeah, he's 21, but I don't know about him either," that seems like a little bit of a stretch of a criticism. Well, he's not 26.
Okay, one more thing on this, because I'm just like, I'm so sick of this line of criticism has been offered up 100 times since that trade in July, right? Some version of this, we're like, oh, I don't know, it's pretty risky. I don't know, what happens if this? Who cares? If they decided at some point in the next 2 years, man, we put way too many chips on the table now. We need to get chips for like 4 years from now. First round picks, young assets, so we can better fortify Anthony Edwards with younger players in a few years from now. Mm-hmm. The list of things on this team right now you could trade for a first round pick includes, or more than one, includes Rudy Gobert. If you needed to spin him again in a year or something, like you wouldn't get the same haul you got, but like you could get a first round pick or two.
Right.
Karl Anthony Towns. I think Jalen Noel is going to be a guy after this season that if you decided, you know what, we're not going to pay him and he just peaked his value in year 3 and someone would love a combo guard like him, you could offload him for a first round pick if you needed to. Jaden McDaniels, you could offload probably for a first. Like there's things you could, if you needed to get first round picks back in future years. There are plenty of assets on this team right now over the next 2 years that you could make that happen with. So calm down.
So, and if you had kept your picks, so like let's say that Connolly had said, you know what, yeah, I'm not trading first round picks, blah blah blah. The value there is really lottery picks. So are you see? I guess I'm confused here because if the Wolves have traded away what turns out to be a bunch of high draft picks, then yeah, it didn't work. It didn't work at all. But they're gambling on those aren't going to be high picks.
Yeah, they're already a playoff team before that trade.
Right. But what I'm saying is so okay, then here's the thing. Like if you're looking for rotational talent, I got to get rotational talent. Okay, you know what? Do something that the Wolves for a long time never did. Hit on some second round picks.
Which is what Connolly does.
They're there. But I mean,
that's why Connolly's here.
We are conditioned, and I'm guilty. I'm guilty of this as much as the next person. We are guilty of thinking in this town, second round picks, they all suck. Because the Wolves for a long time took guys or sold those picks, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, hit on your second round picks. I mean, if this comes down to that the Utah Jazz have a series of lottery picks from the Wolves, everyone's being traded and fired then.
Yeah. Well, look at, wasn't Naz Reid undrafted? Like, they've got rotation guys now that were just...
No, I know. That's
Jordan
what I'm
McLaughlin?
saying.
Was Jordan McLaughlin drafted?
Have good scouting.
Fine,
just
yes.
Just have good scouting. But, like, if you literally have traded away lottery picks, then nothing worked.
Yeah. All worked up now. What is your panic level on Rudy Gobert having a knee brace and just kind of slow cooking during the preseason?
I'd love to see you like this. I'd love to see this. Okay, so... First of all, I don't know enough about the actual like knee problem to know if this is like something that was a problem. That's a chronic thing.
He had a contusion at one point.
Okay,
so he missed like a month with a contusion.
Okay. All right, my only thought.
But I don't know what this is though.
Okay, all right.
This is like I'm looking at his injury history. A few years ago, he was out a month and a half with a knee bone bruise.
Well, Declan knows exactly what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it again, okay? This is why the man is wearing a knee brace, and they're going to ease him in after he got done playing incredibly competitive basketball for his country. That pisses me off. That gets my goat. This was the off season, a time to rest, a time to rehab, a time to practice. That's awesome. I'm not saying take all the time off, but instead you were playing in what is tantamount to playoff type games for your country. And if that costs you even a minute of action in a regular season game with the Wolves, I absolutely hate it. Everybody, get rest. Get ready for your season. You're paid millions of dollars. You were secured with an enormous trade to play for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Drives me crazy that a guy has to now be, might have some issues because he's not a young man and he just played really hard extended minutes for his country. Stop it.
I would say at his age now, he missed 16 games last year. He's probably going to miss 15 games. Like he's probably like a 65 to 67.
Yeah, they'll right.
Even if like relatively healthy.
Yep.
He's at the age now too where he's probably going to have some inflammation here and there and whatever. But as long as he's playing 65 games, and in those 65 games he's grabbing 14 rebounds and, rim protector and stuff.
Yep.
Something to watch. Yeah, Kyle, my Flagrant Howls cohort, he texted me. He's like, you see that big bulky thing under his white? He's trying to hide that knee brace under the white sleeve there on his knee. But
Stop it.
If the Twins front office had traded for him, I'd be very skeptical right now.
That was the first thought
that they
came to
never
mind.
Googled like Rudy Gobert injury.
I can't talk about that. I read all of the coverage when our show got done of the Twins press conference. I was shaking by the end of it.
Yeah, I was kind of in a similar
shaking.
state of mind. Well, that'll be a discussion for another day or not.
I'm not
'cause
starting
I
on
think
that. I'm
people
just saying.
just don't really care
I
anymore.
was mad.
Looking forward to those new uniforms, though. That'll be a blast. Hey, thanks to Federated Insurance for helping power Mackey and Judd on a daily basis here. Score North and Purple Daily. A lot of gratitude toward our friends at Federated, and they've been helping business owners for over 100 years. They're based in Owatonna, and they measure their success by the success of your business, and they help maximize your business through risk management. It's like having a great offensive line, protecting against risks on the horizon. Great guiding hand. Find out more at federatedinsurance.com, where it's our business to protect yours. We got Write That Down predictions coming up. Timberwolves in 1 week. Wild this week. Winter sports are already upon us.
Well,